Imagine meeting someone who appears incredibly confident. They walk into every room expecting attention. They want praise, recognition, and control. They seem convinced that they are always right, and they often dismiss the feelings of others. From the outside, they may look powerful, untouchable, even enviable. One of the most misunderstood aspects of narcissism is the emotional pain that often exists beneath the surface. When people think of a narcissist, they usually picture someone who is arrogant, entitled, attention-seeking, and completely satisfied with themselves. They assume that a person who constantly talks about their achievements or demands admiration must have exceptionally high self-esteem. But in many cases, the opposite is true. What looks like confidence from the outside can actually be a carefully constructed shield protecting a deeply fragile sense of self. Rather than feeling secure, many narcissistic individuals depend on external validation to maintain their emotional balance. Compliments, praise, admiration, and recognition become psychological necessities instead of pleasant experiences. The problem is that external validation never lasts. Satisfaction fades quickly, leaving them searching for the next compliment, the next achievement, or the next opportunity to prove their worth. This creates an exhausting cycle that never truly ends because their self-worth depends so heavily on how others see them. Even small moments of criticism, rejection, or feeling ignored can trigger intense emotional distress. While they may respond with anger, blame, or defensiveness, these reactions often serve to protect them from painful feelings they cannot comfortably acknowledge. This hidden suffering does not excuse manipulative, controlling, or emotionally harmful behavior, but it does help explain why their actions can seem so extreme. Living with a self-image that constantly requires protection is emotionally draining. Every interaction becomes a test. Every disagreement feels personal, and every setback threatens the identity they have worked so hard to maintain. Over time, this relentless need to defend an idealized version of themselves can create chronic stress, emotional instability, and a persistent sense that no amount of success, admiration, or approval is ever enough to bring lasting peace. One of the hidden forces driving narcissistic behavior is an intense fear of shame, rejection, and being exposed. Most people experience shame from time to time, but they are often able to reflect on it, learn from it, and move forward. For many narcissistic individuals, however, shame is experienced very differently. It is not simply an uncomfortable emotion. It can feel like a direct threat to their entire identity. Because so much of their self-worth is built on appearing successful, capable, superior, or special, even minor criticism can feel devastating. A simple disagreement, constructive feedback at work, or someone pointing out a mistake may be interpreted as a personal attack rather than a normal part of everyday life. This is why their reactions can seem confusing or disproportionate. Instead of acknowledging the criticism, they may become defensive, shift the blame onto someone else, deny what happened, or even attack the person who challenged them. These responses are often attempts to escape the painful experience of feeling flawed or inadequate. Rejection creates a similar emotional response. Whether it is a relationship ending, being overlooked for a promotion, or not receiving the admiration they expected, rejection can reinforce deeply rooted fears of not being good enough. Rather than processing those feelings in a healthy way, they may respond by devaluing the other person, pretending they never cared, or convincing themselves that everyone else is at fault. Another common fear is being exposed as ordinary or imperfect. Maintaining an image of confidence and superiority requires constant effort, and the possibility that others might see their vulnerabilities can create ongoing anxiety. As a result, they often avoid accountability, resist honest self-reflection, and become highly sensitive to situations that challenge the image they have worked so hard to create. This constant struggle to protect themselves from shame and rejection can become an exhausting emotional burden that shapes many of their behaviors and relationships. Another hidden sign of deep psychological suffering is the presence of profound insecurity hidden beneath an outward display of confidence. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of narcissism. On the surface, a narcissistic person may appear fearless, self-assured, and convinced of their own superiority. They may speak with certainty, dismiss the opinions of others, and present themselves as someone who always has the right answers. Yet this confidence is often surprisingly fragile. Instead of growing from genuine self-acceptance, it depends on constantly defending an idealized image. Because that image is so important, they become highly invested in protecting it from anything that might reveal weakness, imperfection, or vulnerability. This hidden insecurity influences many of their everyday behaviors. They may exaggerate their accomplishments, seek recognition for even small successes, or compare themselves to others in order to feel superior. They may surround themselves with status symbols, influential people, or impressive achievements because these become extensions of the identity they want others to see. At the same time, they may struggle to celebrate someone else's success. Another person's achievement can feel like a personal threat, as though someone else's value somehow reduces their own. This can lead to envy, competitiveness, or attempts to minimize the accomplishments of others. Their insecurity also makes authentic vulnerability extremely difficult. Admitting uncertainty, apologizing sincerely, or asking for help may feel dangerous because these actions require acknowledging imperfections. Instead, they often rely on psychological defenses such as denial, rationalization, blame, or projection. These defenses may temporarily protect their self-image, but they also prevent emotional growth and genuine self-awareness. Over time, maintaining this protective armor becomes emotionally exhausting. Every situation carries the possibility of failure, embarrassment, or comparison, leaving them constantly alert and emotionally guarded. While they may appear strong to the outside world, they are often carrying an invisible burden, the ongoing fear that if people truly saw them without the carefully constructed image, they would no longer feel admired, respected, or worthy. One of the most painful yet least visible aspects of narcissism is the difficulty in forming genuine emotional connections with other people. From the outside, a narcissistic person may appear to have a large social circle, an active social life, or many professional relationships. They may be charismatic, charming, and skilled at making strong first impressions. However, having many people around is not the same as experiencing real emotional intimacy. Healthy relationships require trust, empathy, vulnerability, and the ability to see another person's thoughts and feelings as equally important as your own. These qualities are often difficult for someone whose emotional energy is largely focused on protecting a fragile sense of self. As a result, many of their relationships become based on admiration, usefulness, or control rather than mutual understanding and emotional closeness. This creates a cycle of loneliness that is often hidden from others. Because they fear rejection or exposure, they may avoid showing their authentic emotions. Instead, they present a carefully managed version of themselves that they believe others will admire or respect. The problem is that when people only connect with the image, the individual never experiences the comfort of being accepted for who they truly are. Even in long-term friendships or romantic relationships, they may feel emotionally disconnected because the relationship is built around maintaining appearances rather than sharing genuine vulnerability. They may also struggle to empathize with the emotional needs of others, causing repeated misunderstandings, conflicts, and broken trust. Over time, family members, friends, and partners may distance themselves to protect their own emotional well-being. Each lost relationship can reinforce feelings of isolation, yet instead of reflecting on their own role, they may blame others or convince themselves that everyone else is ungrateful, jealous, or incapable of appreciating them. This pattern leaves them trapped in a lonely existence where they are surrounded by people, but rarely experience the deep emotional security, trust, and acceptance that come from authentic human connection. The final hidden sign of deep suffering is living in a constant state of emotional threat, where the world feels unpredictable, competitive, and filled with potential attacks on their self-image. For many narcissistic individuals, everyday situations are not experienced in the same way that most people experience them. A casual disagreement may feel like humiliation. Someone else's success may feel like a personal defeat. Being ignored, corrected, or not receiving the recognition they expected can trigger intense emotional reactions because these experiences challenge the identity they have worked so hard to protect. As a result, they often move through life in a state of psychological vigilance, always scanning for signs of criticism, disrespect, rejection, or betrayal. This ongoing alertness can be mentally exhausting because they rarely feel completely safe or emotionally secure. Living with this constant sense of threat affects nearly every aspect of their behavior. They may become highly controlling because control creates the illusion of safety. They may insist on having the final word in conversations, dominate decision-making, or react strongly when situations do not unfold according to their expectations. They may also misinterpret neutral events as personal insults, assuming that other people are intentionally trying to undermine or embarrass them. This pattern often leads to unnecessary conflict, damaged relationships, and an increasing sense of isolation. Ironically, the very behaviors they use to protect themselves often create the rejection and distance they fear most. Others may begin walking on eggshells around them, avoiding honest conversations or withdrawing completely to escape constant tension. Yet instead of recognizing this pattern, the narcissistic individual may see themselves as the victim of unfair treatment or disloyal people. Over time, carrying the burden of constant defensiveness, emotional reactivity, and fear of losing status or admiration can create chronic stress. Rather than experiencing inner stability, they remain trapped in a cycle where every interaction becomes a test of their worth, every challenge feels like a threat, and genuine peace remains frustratingly out of reach. Perhaps the most important idea to understand is that recognizing a narcissist's suffering is not the same as excusing harmful behavior. This distinction is essential because people often fall into one of two extremes. On one hand, they may view narcissistic individuals as simply cruel, selfish, or intentionally malicious, ignoring the emotional struggles that may exist beneath the surface. On the other hand, once they learn about the deep insecurity, shame, and psychological pain that can contribute to narcissistic behavior, they may begin to justify manipulation, emotional abuse, or controlling actions out of sympathy. Neither perspective provides a balanced understanding. It is entirely possible for someone to carry significant emotional wounds while also being responsible for the choices they make and the impact those choices have on others. Many narcissistic behaviors develop as protective strategies designed to avoid painful emotions such as shame, rejection, or feelings of inadequacy. While these strategies may have originated as ways of coping, they can become deeply harmful when they involve gaslighting, intimidation, emotional manipulation, exploitation, or a lack of empathy for others. Understanding the origins of these behaviors can help explain why they occur, but explanation should never be confused with justification. Every individual, regardless of their personality traits or psychological struggles, has a responsibility to recognize harmful patterns and seek healthier ways of relating to other people. This distinction is especially important for family members, friends, and romantic partners who may feel trapped between compassion and self-protection. Empathy is a valuable human quality, but empathy should never require accepting repeated disrespect, emotional abuse, or the violation of healthy boundaries. You can acknowledge that someone is struggling internally while also deciding that their behavior is not acceptable in your life. In fact, maintaining clear boundaries is often one of the healthiest responses because it protects your emotional well-being without denying the complexity of the other person's experience. True compassion includes honesty, accountability, and respect for both yourself and others, rather than sacrificing your own mental and emotional health in an attempt to rescue someone who refuses to take responsibility for their actions.